when identity and economics don't match. Over the last several months, we have not been discussing random topics, although if you haven't been following the thread, they might seem random. But they have been charting a course. We've been building an investigation. In January, we began talking about things that many small business owners never name directly. Solopreneurs, freelancers, side hustlers don't think about their business as a entity, as an organization, as a structure. And especially if it's a hobby business, they don't think about things like leadership and agency, authority, access, and decision structure. We talked about the fact that in a solo business, no one is standing above you handing down priorities. No one is telling you, this is the project that matters the most. This is the service you should be offering. This is the opportunity you should decline. This is the price structuring that matches the business you're building. And it sounds like freedom. And it is freedom, but with freedom comes responsibility. Because in a solo business, the owner is not just the worker. The owner is the decision maker and every layer of management in between, and all of the supporting staff as well. And if there's no structure governing these decisions, then every decision begins competing with every other decision. In February, we moved into structure before scale, and we reintroduced the 9-point marketing plan. This is a framework that helps us look at the life cycle of a customer relationship. How a stranger becomes aware of your business, that stranger becomes a lead, the lead becomes a client, and then what happens after the sale that turns the cycle around again. And during that lesson, we introduced a fictional character named Alex. Alex matters because Alex gives us a way to observe this real pattern without holding a mirror to ourselves every single time. Because Alex is not a villain, he's not a joke, and he's not a cautionary tale about incompetence. Alex is a very common, competent operator doing what many competent operators do. In our case, Alex began as a web designer and then expanded into copy and also SEO. And that became sales funnels associated with the website. And that led to email campaigns. And the email campaigns lead to CRM builds. And the CRM builds are all about the automation. And oh, by the way, then we add some AI tools into the mix. And every one of these expansions seems reasonable. Every one of these expansions solve a problem for a client. And yet, when we look at Alex's business through the lens of the 9-point marketing plan, we discover that the customer journey feels disjointed. Not because Alex lacks skill in any of the deliverables, but because the structure behind the offers he's making is unclear. So last week, on March 9th, we took the investigation further and we looked at when business models collide. We mapped Alex's activities to the 9 business models, and we discovered something even more important. It isn't that Alex is simply offering a broad portfolio of services. The issue is Alex is operating across multiple business models simultaneously. Some of this work looks like implementation. Some of this work looks like agency services. Some of it looks like software support. Some of it looks like support, tech support, help desk services. Some of it even looks like coaching and advising. And when one business operates under multiple conflicting sets of rules, instability will always appear. Caveat: if the entity we're talking about is a 20-person marketing agency, well, I don't know, it's a random number. I don't know if that number is 10, 12, 24. At some number of people, there are enough people in each of the different specialty functions that operating across multiple business models simultaneously is not inherently unstable. But when we're talking about solopreneurs, sole proprietors, owner operators, freelancers, SEO, individual technical experts who are also the business, the freelancers, the independent consultants, the independent contractors. This is where instability is driven by the fact that their offer is scattered. So today we're going deeper, again, not in tactics and not in tools. We're going deeper into identity of the business. Because before someone can declare which model governs their work, they often have to confront something that is more uncomfortable. They have to confront the idea that the business they describe might not actually be the business that is paying them. The business you're describing may not be the business that's actually paying you. And there's value in aspirational identity. So this is not a caution against aspirational identity, but it is a caution against scaling when you don't have stability. It is a caution against trying to overreach and do too much when you have the resources of me, myself, and I. Because if identity and economics do not match, the operator begins making decisions according to the wrong rules. And they're not wrong rules because the rule itself is incorrect. It's a valid and correct rule in the correct setting. It's wrong because it's not the right rule for what the person is actually building. So that's what today is about. This quarter, our focus in GHL Business Launch is architectural recognition. We're helping operators see the structure of their business clearly enough that declaration becomes possible. Today's lesson, literally, we're in the middle of this process. It is a recognition lesson, and the question underneath the entire idea is very simple. What kind of business is actually governing the work that you're doing today? What does Alex say his business is? So talking about our character, Alex. I build websites. I run a digital agency. I build marketing systems. I help businesses grow. I'm building a SaaS platform. Imagine Alex is at a networking event. Someone asks that most common question that comes up. Everybody's standing around drinking a beverage of choice, and they say, "So what do you do?" And what does Alex say? The answer depends on the day or the audience or what Alex is excited about at the moment or what project he's working on for a particular client this particular week. Or it depends on which part of the business Alex wants to emphasize or get more of. And Alex might say, I build websites. That sounds concrete. It's certainly honest since that's what he started out as a web designer. It sounds understandable. But on another day, Alex might say, I run a digital agency because that sounds reasonable because it's the more general concept. Or I build marketing systems. Yep. Or I build growth websites, which we'll talk about in a moment. I help businesses grow. I help businesses scale. Or even I'm building a SaaS platform. And here's why this scattered way of describing what he's doing, which is all correct, matters. Each of these statements is plausible, but each of them implies a different business structure. A web designer is not organized as a SaaS company. A SaaS company is not organized as a digital agency. A digital agency is not a strategist, advisor, coach, or consultant. And I help businesses grow or I help businesses scale is so broad that it can hide almost any underlying structure. And these identity statements are not neutral. They carry assumptions. When someone says, I build websites, the listener assumes a project-based service. When someone says, I run a digital agency, the listener assumes a full service, and we talk about full service in some of the other presentations. They assume a full service organization with ongoing responsibility and multiple capabilities, which I talked about a few minutes ago. When someone says, I'm building a SaaS platform, the listener assumes software economics, repeatability, product logic, and scalability. When someone says, I help businesses grow, the listener hears the aspiration, but not the structure. So the first recognition point today, the words people use to describe their business is not just about branding, they are structural signals to the audience. And if the identity signal does not match the economic reality, the operator begins living in a kind of structural confusion. And that confusion is usually not visible to outsiders, but the operator feels it. They feel it when pricing advice doesn't fit. They feel it when marketing advice conflicts. They feel it when one expert says productize and another says build recurring revenue and another says go high tech it. And yet none of that settles the business into stability because the underlying identity has not been reconciled with the underlying economics. So this is the core idea of today's lessons. Identity lives in conversation. Economics live in invoices. Identity is what someone says what you say when someone asks you, what do you do? Identity is what someone says when asked, what do you do? Economics, that's what the clients are actually paying you for. Identity is narrative, and aspirational narrative is valuable. Identity is often built out of aspiration. But economics are built out of repeated transactions. And most operators are drifting into a mismatch just naturally. They don't ever wake up and decide to misrepresent their business. It happens slowly. It happens inadvertently. It happens one helpful answer at a time. They're trying to do the right thing, and the client asks, can you do just one more thing? Or they opportunity appears, hey, can you help me with this? Or they see an ad, hey, I'm looking for someone who can do that. a new tool becomes available. So we say I can provide AI agents, or I can provide voice AI receptionists. A course introduces a new possibility of growth websites. And I'll talk about that in a second, or a few minutes. Or, and I'm drawing a blank about some other examples of the new courses. Community builders. So you say, oh, I have a course that talks about how to be a community builder. And so this bright, shiny object, it's a good thing. Bright, shiny objects are very rarely about things that aren't a good idea. If they're not a good idea, Tosin, welcome. If they're not a good idea, they wouldn't be shiny. They would be dull. And it's like, I can ignore that. The reason they're bright, shiny objects is because they are a good idea. And the good idea comes along and the operator says, I could probably do that. Or I know enough that I could solve that problem. That's close enough to parallel to what I'm doing. So like the copywriting versus SEO. So doing copywriting on the public facing part of the website. Well, sometimes there's the backside of the technical on-site part of the website that you have to do as part of writing the copy on the public facing side. So if you're doing that part of the on-site website SEO, you might as well do the other part as the other technical SEO stuff as well, right? It seems parallel. You say, well, if I'm already building the website, doing SEO could be a new line of revenue. Maybe it could be my recurring revenue component of my website build. But over time, the operator begins telling a story about the business that reflects the direction of movement rather than the source of revenue. And this is where the identity shift begins. And there's a difference between identity shift and identity drift. Again, we're going to talk about that. But the identity drift begins when something subtle but serious happens. The operator begins making decisions based on who they believe they are and who they want to be, not based on how the business actually works. And this affects which opportunities they say yes to, which opportunities they feel guilty about saying no to, how they price, how they introduce themselves, and how they compare themselves to peers. It affects what kind of future they imagine they are building. And if it's a shift, that might be a good thing. If it's a drift, it creates instability that's hidden inside the structure. If someone believes they're building SaaS, they interpret slow growth differently than someone who understands that they're actually operating a services business. If someone thinks that they run an agency, they may tolerate underpricing and chaotic scope because they think they're building the agency. If someone believes they're a strategist or a consultant or advisor, they may chase authority positioning while their invoices keep coming in from implementation work. And this is not because the operator lacks intelligence. It's because the identity and the economics have quietly diverged, and it's no longer aspirational, it's drift. Today's lesson is designed to bring these two, identity and economics, back into the same room. To understand why this drift happens, we need to reconnect the ideas we discussed earlier this month and in the last couple of months, earlier this quarter. Agency is the ability to act. Agency for yourself, agency for your actions in the public space. Authority means the right to decide for yourself, the authority granted to you by someone else to act or decide on their behalf. Access means having the ability to reach the tools, resources, and structures needed to carry out the decisions. Solo operators usually always have agency. You are layer zero and layer one, an agent of yourself. You have the ability to act. You have the ability to build. You have the ability to, because of the global reach of communication technology, you have the ability to sell. You have the ability to access information and learn. You have the ability to deliver results. As a solo operator, you also have formal authority. There's no boss standing over you. There's no executive team forcing strategic priorities on you. There's no corporate board approving every service that you add or subtract from your portfolio. And this means that the solo operator has authority to decide what this business actually is. And yet, what I see is many operators avoid exercising that authority, not because of weakness, but because avoiding the declaration actually feels responsible. I hear people say things like, I don't want to limit myself. Here's the one I hear a lot. I'm just figuring it out. I want to stay flexible. I've never heard it worded this way, but it's the idea of I'm just helping clients with whatever they need. I literally was partnered with a guy who said this one. I'm doing services. In this case, it was pay-per-click, Google and Meta ads, and then it shifted to SEO. I'm doing pay-per-click services. I'm doing SEO services now so that I can fund the thing I really want to build. And all of these pieces will fit together eventually, is the idea. I'm going to do this and that and this, that, and I'm going to build enough client base, and then I'll be able to build a team. I'll have enough income coming in that I can have the team where I can specialize. These sentences all sound reasonable. These sentences are all, in fact, wise in the right setting, but they hide the deeper issue. The operator is acting constantly, all the time, but not governing the structure of their own business. They have agency, they have authority, but they have not exercised the authority to declare, this is the model that is governing my work. And when the declaration never occurs, the business accumulates complexity, one reasonable decision at a time. Access also matters here because sometimes operators describe themselves according to the structure they want to have later, but not the one that they can actually support now. The person might use the language of agency ownership without access to a team, or the language of SaaS without access to the product infrastructure, or the language of strategy without access to authority-based demand, without the audience. And when the identity outruns access, the operator starts playing a game that they do not have the structure to support. And that creates friction. It creates strain. It creates a feeling of being busy while somehow still being unstable. It creates an underlying disconcertedness, uncertainty that they then try to compensate with bravado and overlay and a mask of confidence. And because of that, when we talk about identity and economics not matching, we aren't talking about branding mistakes. We're talking about what happens when agency is active, but authority is undeclared and access is misread. And this is a structural issue. And what I see is it shows up often in the digital services world, not in the handful of agencies that are doing very, very well in whatever their niche is. It happens in the mass of people stuck in the middle. The middle 50, 60% of the bell curve. This is the pattern I want you to see clearly today. Identity drift happens when the operator begins describing the business according to what they hope it becomes, what sounds bigger, what sounds more impressive, what the market seems to celebrate, the latest and greatest idea, or what other people online get compliments for saying. And in the high level world, especially, this is incredibly common. Why? Because the ecosystem is full of adjacent possibilities. Funnels and automation and CRM builds, white label SaaS and agencies and AI tools, lead generation, consulting, communities, training templates, products, support systems. Every one of these is a real service, a real product, a real thing. Each one can generate revenue. Each one is close enough to the others that a capable operator can imagine doing more than one. And because they operate inside the same login environment, people easily begin using identity language from one model while still earning money inside another. Someone says, I'm building a SaaS company, but their invoices are coming from setting up other people's accounts and one-off client implementations. Someone says, I run a marketing agency, but they don't control the client relationships, and most of their work comes through subcontract channels. Someone might say, I'm a consultant or I'm a strategist, but the invoices show that they're doing funnel builds, website migrations, workflow editing, workflow troubleshooting, manual technical work. This is not fraud. This is drift. The narrative is getting ahead of the economics. And because the narrative is usually more emotionally satisfying than the invoices, the operator begins following the narrative. And that's where trouble begins. Because you cannot price correctly or position clearly or build stable systems around a business that is being described by the wrong identity. And this is on the screen. I have a very interesting thing that happened literally today. Paulson Thomas with HighLevel is interviewing Paige Basher and talking about identity shift. And this is different than identity drift in that it's the idea that when you do this shift that Alex is that our character Alex is following, shifting from a web designer to what Paige is calling a growth website, it's using the set of tools to make a different kind of SaaS offer. But you have to watch the language that she's presenting and analyze whether you have the capacity to do what she's suggesting before you turn and start using that language. Because what she's suggesting requires a set of agency, authority, and access capacity before you can offer what she's suggesting. The shift could be real. Drift is when it's done smoothly, efficiently, and well. Web designer to digital architect is absolutely a valid path. When it's allowed to just grow itself organically, that's drift. So let's move into some recognition mirrors. These are not avatars like Alex. Alex is our avatar. These are archetypes. These are patterns of identity drift that I see often. And here's the pattern you're going to see, the ladder, if you will. Operator identity statement and a behavior that can be detected, the economic reality. And what I want to show you is a recognition moment. I want you to listen for the language, the phrases, the self-description, the justification, because this is where recognition can happen. So the SaaS founder, the operator identity says something like, I'm building a SaaS company, or we're moving away from services and into SaaS, or right now we're onboarding clients manually, but the real goal is SaaS. The language is familiar. It sounds modern. It sounds scalable. It sounds like the future. Goodness, it's a fancy acronym, and we love acronyms. But if you look at their calendar, the operator is doing a specific kind of work. They're manually onboarding each client. They're setting up the pipelines. They're connecting the integrations. They're customizing the workflows. They're troubleshooting the automations, customizing the automations, building landing pages, explaining how to use the system on one-on-one Zoom calls. And every client comes with slightly different needs. And because the operator wants the client to succeed, they keep adapting the setup. Here's the economic reality. The invoices reveal something really simple. The money is not coming from the software subscription. It's coming from setup fees. It's coming from implementation work. It's coming from custom support. It's coming from configuration. It's manual labor wrapped around the subscription. That means the economic engine of the business is service delivery, not software. And this is the moment that this matters. The business absolutely may become SaaS later. That future is a possibility. But right now, the business is not governed by SaaS economics. It's governed by implementation economics. And if they're not charging for the setup fees, they're undercharging for their time. And when they're undercharging for their time, the economics fail. And until the operator recognizes that disconnect, they will keep using the wrong standards to evaluate their business. They will continue to wonder why SaaS growth feels hard and why their margins are so thin. They'll wonder why getting to the recurring revenue feels labor heavy. The answer is not that SaaS is broken. The answer is that they are pricing as SaaS, but they haven't changed from a services business. Or the agency owner. I run a marketing agency. We are a full service digital agency. We're a digital architect. Or even I own an agency and we support several clients. It sounds established. It sounds like structure. It sounds like scale. It sounds like infrastructure. But if you look at what this operator actually does, a different pattern starts appearing. The projects come from other agency. The operator is building funnels for someone else's client. They're configuring CRMs for some other firm's account. They're doing white label fulfillment. They're solving implementation problems inside someone else's client relationship. The work is real. The skill is real. The value that they're bringing to the table is real. But the position in the economic chain is not the one implied by agency owner. Invoices reveal that the business is not primarily monetizing a client relationship. It is monetizing subcontract support labor. And it is a valid business model. It may even be a very good business model. But it is not the same, and marketing for it is not the same as running an agency with full responsibility for positioning, sales, pricing, and delivery, and client retention for the client. This friction occurs when the operator evaluates themselves according to agency services, build retainers, raise prices, own the strategy, lead the account. But the actual economic reality is closer to contracts or support work. That means the wrong assumptions are being applied. The issue doesn't become lack of motivation. The issue is identity mismatch. Or the strategist. I help businesses with strategy. Or I'm really a strategist, not just an implementer. Or my value is thinking about thinking. But the actual workday starts revealing another story. The operator is spending most of their time building funnels, editing workflows, writing email nurture sequences, connecting systems, implementing campaigns. They may indeed be thinking strategically and have strategic insight about the things that they're building. Clients may even appreciate their judgment and their advice, but the bulk of the labor that they get paid for is implementation. The invoices say funnel build, workflow configuration, campaign setup, technical execution, troubleshooting. This means that the economic model is still implementation-led, not authority-led, not strategy-led. And this matters because strategy businesses and implementation businesses scale differently. They market differently. They price differently, and they create authority differently. When someone believes they are a strategist, while their business is still economically governed by implementation, they will be waiting for authority economics to appear without actually building the structure that supports those economics, because they're busy doing implementation. And this creates frustration, not because the strategy is fake, but because the business hasn't grown to be that model yet. Or the automation agency. I run an automation agency. We build automation systems for businesses. We help businesses automate their operations. It sounds modern. It sounds scalable. It sounds cutting edge and cool. But what happens when the calendar is filling up with things like fixing A2P registration, troubleshooting Twilio, solving SMS delivery issues, repairing broken integration, reauthorizing disconnected apps, testing workflows, answering why didn't this trigger fire? The work is real, the client need is real, but this is not primarily agency scale automation architecture. This is technical support and operations troubleshooting. The invoices reveal that the money is coming from solving immediate technical problems, not necessarily from repeatable automation retainers, not from robust systems consulting, not from scalable automation product, from problem solving. Or worse, they're doing all the problem solving, but they're only getting paid for the subscription. And this means that the operator may be talking like an automation agency while operating economically like a tech support consultant. Nothing wrong with it. It's certainly not a moral issue. It's a structural issue. And until it's named, the operator keeps chasing the wrong kind of growth, because it could very well be that just shifting the language from automation agency to support agency clarifies the relationships and establishes stability. Or we have this AI automation agency, or we help businesses use AI WhatsApp automations and customer communication. We're building an AI-driven automation company. And then you actually look at what's happening in the business, and it's really just experimentation. It's training, it's researching, it's testing. It's building demos. It's talking about possibilities. It's having interesting conversations, maybe even doing some proofs of concept, attending all the trainings, doing the learning, exploring, positioning, talking about the future. But invoices are thin or irregular or non-existent. Revenue hasn't stabilized enough to say the business is governed by AI automation economics. The business is governed by exploration rather than production. And this is one of the easiest places for identity to outrun economics because the language of AI is powerful, exciting, socially rewarded, but the possibility of a thing is not the same thing as the economic reality of the thing. And until the gap is clearly recognized, the operator may mistake conceptual excitement for business structure. Or we have the SaaS reseller. I run a SaaS platform. We provide businesses with an all-in-one software solution. We're a software company serving small businesses. And the we in that sentence is me, myself, and I. But behind the scenes, the operator is manually onboarding each client, setting up the CRM, building pipelines, connecting phone numbers, writing the workflows, customizing the forms, teaching the client how to use the systems, rebuilding pieces when the client gets confused, or worse, when they get confused. Invoices show something very specific. Yes, there are recurring software subscriptions, but the actual business depends on the labor attached to those subscriptions. Without onboarding, without manual setup, without customer support, without customization, the software alone would not carry the revenue. They're actually reselling a direct subscription to the platform and getting paid a commission on the sale, and then doing the onboarding work as a bonus or as an incentive. They're not getting paid for the onboarding work. This means the operator is not running on pure SaaS economics. They're running on a services support software model, which can be valid and profitable if it's named and structured accurately. But they're doing an affiliate service. They're doing affiliate marketing and comparing themselves to software businesses that are operating on entirely different rules, providing services that those SaaS companies are providing, but getting paid as a salesperson, as a commissions-only salesperson. So why all of this matters? Why does it matter whether identity and economics match? As long as money's coming in, why not just keep going? And this is why. When identity and economics drift apart, the consequences cascade across the entire business. Advice becomes confusing. If someone believes they're running a SaaS company, they will seek SaaS advice, which sounds like build recurring revenue, automate onboarding, focus on product stability, scale through software. But if the business is still economically governed by services, that advice won't stabilize the business. The advice wasn't wrong. It belongs to a different vehicle. If someone believes they run an agency, they may seek agency advice, retainers, high ticket, team growth, outcome pricing, client ownership. But if the business is mostly doing contract support work, that advice will collide with the actual structure. Again, not wrong, just the wrong vehicle. 2, pricing becomes incoherent. Freelancers, agencies, SaaS companies, consultants, support contractors, educators do not price according to the same logic. A freelancer prices labor and capacity. A SaaS company prices a subscription access to the system. An agency prices responsibility, outcome, scope. A strategist prices insight, perspective, judgment. If the operator is unknowingly mixing these models, pricing advice will never settle. Should I charge hourly? Should I charge project based? Monthly? Per user seat? A retainer? Setup fee plus subscription? Pay for performance, pay for results? Consulting plus implementation? And the reason this conversation feels endless for many operators is that the business model itself has not been clarified. Because if you're doing the right model for you, it may very well be that you charge for strategy, and you give implementation troubleshooting as a no charge bonus. But if this is your core business, you better charge for it. Third, offers keep expanding. When no model governs the work, every adjacent service feels reasonable. If I build websites, then maybe I should do copywriting too. If I do copywriting, maybe I should add SEO. And if I do SEO, I might as well manage emails. And if I'm managing emails, maybe I should just resell the platform. And if I'm reselling the platform, maybe I should do automations. And if I'm doing automations, where does my AI agent come in? Where does my AI receptionist come in? And every one of those steps is justified. And that's exactly why this problem is potentially dangerous. It doesn't actually look reckless. It looks reasonable. But number 4, decision fatigue will grow. Without a governing structure, every opportunity requires individual fresh evaluation. Should I say yes? Should I say no? Should I add this? Should I price this one differently because I'm going to do a different thing? Should I market? How should I market this? Should I make this new thing my core offer? Could I productize this? Maybe I should outsource it. What can I build around it? When there's no governing model, no internal hierarchy exists for these decisions. And each decision has to be made individually. And at the same time, you're continuing to do your other services for people who you've already committed to. And this is when operators begin describing their experiences as overwhelm, decision fatigue, analysis paralysis, pivot, slammed, never feeling caught up. These are not random emotional problems, and they are not a mindset problem. Very often, they are the lived symptoms, the natural outcomes of ungoverned decision authority. Compares become invalid. I wrote that wrong. I shortened it. Comparisons become invalid. Fifth, the operator compares themselves to the wrong people. This is one of the quietest, but potentially most destructive forms of instability. When a freelancer compares themselves to a SaaS founder and feels left behind. A subcontractor compares themselves to an agency and feels small or insignificant. A technical implementer compares themselves to a strategist, and feels underpositioned. An operator in exploration mode compares themselves to a mature business with stable recurring revenue and assumes that they're failing instead of just growing, developing. these comparisons are invalid because the businesses are operating under different structures. The idea, don't judge a book by its cover. For sure, don't judge it by the glossy social media image that it's presenting. And also, don't judge your chapter 2 against someone else's chapter 12. Because if you do, this creates for you discouragement when what you need is clarity. So yes, this all matters. It matters because the identity of a business shapes the advice it seeks, the pricing it believes, the offers it adds, the standards it uses, and the decision it makes. And the it can be a person. And if identity does not match economics, instability becomes almost inevitable when it's one person. So let's make this practical. If someone wants to understand the real structure of their business, here's a simple diagnostic tool, the invoice test. One of the cleanest ways to break the spell of identity drift is because identity lives in language, but economics lives in transactions. So don't start with your website. Don't start with your Instagram bio or your LinkedIn headline or what you say at networking events when you hand someone your business card. Open your invoices from the last 12 months. Not one or two, enough to see the pattern. Maybe not all of them, but enough to see the pattern and categorize them. What are you actually getting paid for? Did you get paid for web design? Did you get paid for social media content? Did you get paid for social media engagement? Did you get paid for copywriting? Did you get paid for CRM setups, troubleshooting, consulting, subscriptions, done for you execution? Which one of those categories dominates? Which types of invoices create the cash flow that keeps the business alive? Which type of work occurs repeatedly versus intermittent? Which kind of work pays reliably? What kind of work is occasional, aspirational, or experimental? This is where you will probably experience a quiet but a powerful realization. The business that you're describing when you hand somebody your business card is probably not the business that your invoices describe. If you say you run a SaaS company, but the invoices say you get paid for implementation. When you say you run an agency, but the invoices say tech support as a subcontractor. Someone positions themselves as a strategist, but the invoices say funnel builds or CRM builds. When someone says they're building an AI automation agency, but the invoices say troubleshooting and setup. Notice what this test does. It's not to shame you. It's not to accuse you of deception. It's not even to say that your aspiration is invalid. It's simply to reveal what the governing economic structure of the business is today, not the hope for structure tomorrow, not the future model, what is current. And that matters because declaration cannot happen honestly until recognition happens first. You cannot declare what model governs the work if you've never looked at the work clearly. And you cannot declare with clarity what model is your aspirational model if you've never looked at the work clearly. Because until you look at the work clearly, you can't chart a course to your aspirational shift, as discussed in the high-level presentation that was literally today, this morning. The invoicing test will help you see where you are today. And it will reveal an important pattern. For many operators, you will have one or two invoice categories that pay your bills. And you have several others that consume attention, but don't sustain the business. And this means that the operator is carrying complexity for offers that do not actually belong inside the governing structure. You've made commitments to people that you have to fulfill on, but they're a distraction from your core offer. Until this issue becomes visible, you will continue pouring time, thought, and energy into services that feel productive, but are not actually stabilizing the business. The invoice test is not just a diagnostic exercise. It's a recognition device that keeps the operator from, helps the operator move from, this is how I talk about my business, to this is how my business actually makes money. And once that shift happens, the new question appears. If this is the economic structure that is actually sustaining the business, what kind of business am I actually building? And is it the business that I want to build? Here's how today's lesson fits in the broader arc. This quarter, our focus is on architectural recognition, not hype, not tactics, recognition. We're helping operators understand what they often describe as marketing problems, time available problems, or discipline problems may actually be business structure problems. January gave us a philosophical groundwork: agency, authority, access, decision responsibility. February helped us look at the customer journey through the lens of the 9-point marketing plan. March 9th exposed business model collision, and today exposed identity drift. Next week, we're going to talk again about the business models. Why? Because once you see that identity and economics don't match, the next question isn't, which of the 9 business models am I touching? The next question is, what larger economic category is this business operating in? Are we looking at product logic, service logic, support logic, authority logic, distribution logic? The clustered business models helps us reduce confusion by grouping the model landscape into categories that share economic rules, which will help us make the field easier to see. Which gives us the framework, the understanding that allows us to move into March 30th. When we're going to talk with Dave Robbs about what business are you building. And this session matters because recognition alone is not enough. At some point, you must stop merely observing the conflict and start declaring the structure. And what is the current structure and what is the aspirational structure? And if it's an aspirational structure, charting the course to that aspiration as opposed to randomly doing whatever is current offer in the moment. This is the declaration moment. Because we're not talking about perfection. We're not talking about permanence. We're talking about this is the business model that governs the work right now. And this is the path that we want to chart forward. Without that declaration, every opportunity continues to compete with every other opportunity. And on April 6th, we're going to talk about pricing in a global economy. I want this to be clear. This is where an important principle emerges. Just because you can price low doesn't mean you should. Why? Because pricing is not just a moral decision or a desperation decision. Pricing reflects the economic structure of the business. A solopreneur prices one, a support contractor prices one way. An agency prices another way. A SaaS company prices another. The strategist has a different pricing model. The subcontractor prices differently. And if the business model is unclear, pricing will feel arbitrary. Once the structure is clear, pricing becomes intelligible. Pricing has a range that makes sense. And after pricing, so in context, after pricing, after we get through that module, then the curriculum is shifting, because after that recognition and declaration, we start talking about alignment and implementation. And that's why later in the year, in going into the second quarter, we're going to talk about savvy sender. We're going to talk about ethical automation. We're going to talk about customer experience, lifetime value, referrals. These are not random topics. These are the downstream consequences of getting the structure right. You cannot communicate clearly if the business model is unclear. You cannot automate confusion. Customer experience only compounds when the offer and the model are coherent. If the clients are all different and unique, the customer experience diverges, not converges. Lifetime value cannot be built on an unstable identity. Referrals come from clarity, not just from asking louder. Today's lesson matters because it sits at the hinge point between recognition and declaration. Identity drift is one of the last veils that has to come off before an operator can say, I understand what this business actually is. Once that happens, authority returns. Not authority as a title, but authority as the ability to deliberately decide the structure of the business. Here's the question I want to leave you with. If someone asks you, what do you do? What would you say? And then if we looked only at our invoices, would that description still be accurate? Once identity and economics align, several things begin to happen. Advice to follow becomes clearer. Price becomes clearer. Offers get simpler. Target market gets identifiable. Decision fatigue decreases. Progress becomes easier to sustain. Not because the work disappears, but because the work is governed by declared structure that specifies what work is going to be done and what work is going to be referred to someone else. And that is the journey this program is trying to support. From instability to recognition to declaration to alignment. Thank you for thinking with me today.